I spent 38 years in construction, and the one thing that trade teaches you, the thing nobody puts in a manual, is how to read what's underneath, not the surface. Any fool can see the surface. I mean the bones, the load-bearing parts, the places where pressure has been quietly building for years before the whole thing gives way. I thought I understood my family that way. I thought I knew where every weight was carried, every stress point, every hairline crack. I was wrong. And it took lying alone in a hospital bed at 2 in the morning, hooked up to a heart monitor, listening to my own son laugh at a party 3 blocks away, to finally understand how badly I'd misread the foundation. My name is Arthur. I'm 63 years old. I live, or I used to live, in a 4-bedroom house in Oakville, Ontario, the house I built the equity in over 25 years of careful work and careful saving. I drove a used F-150. I bought my dress shirts at Mark's. I packed my own lunch 4 days out of 5 and thought nothing of it, because that's how you build something that lasts. My son's name is Jason. He's 31. Smart kid. Got his mother's sharpness, and I thought for a long time my sense of practicality. He married a woman named Sasha 6 years ago, and in the beginning I liked her well enough. She was charming. She laughed at the right moments. She called me Art right from the start, like we were old friends, and I took that as a good sign. I should have taken it as information. Jason had a younger sister, my daughter Lily, who lives out in Victoria and calls me every Sunday without fail. She is, without question, the better of my 2 children, and I say that with full awareness of how that sounds. She is also the only one who knew what was really happening inside my marriage, and the only one who told me the truth about it before I was ready to hear it. My wife, my ex-wife now, her name was Ruth. We were married for 27 years. For at least 10 of those years, I think I was more of a financing mechanism than a husband. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's accurate, and I've done enough grieving about it that I can now state it plainly, the way you state a measurement or a load calculation. Just a fact. Ruth liked nice things. That's not a crime. But Ruth liked nice things paid for by someone else's labor, which is a slightly different situation. She liked the kitchen renovation we did in 2019, the one that ran $60,000, including the Italian tile she'd seen in a magazine. She liked the lease on her Lexus. She liked the twice-yearly trips to Palm Springs and the membership at the tennis club in Burlington. She liked all of it just fine. What she liked less as the years went on was me. I noticed it the way you notice a slow leak. Not all at once, but in accumulation. The way she'd leave the room when I came in. The way conversations with me were always shorter than conversations with anyone else. The way she'd look at me sometimes across the dinner table, like I was a piece of furniture she'd gotten tired of, but hadn't gotten around to replacing yet. I told myself it was just the natural settling of a long marriage. I told myself a lot of things. Now, the party. Jason's birthday is in October. He turned 31 last year on a Thursday. But they held the party on the Saturday, a big thing at a rented space in downtown Oakville, catered, open bar, the works. Ruth had helped plan it. She'd been talking about it for weeks. I'd written the check for most of it without being asked, because that was my role. That was always my role. I drove myself to the hospital on a Friday night. It started in the afternoon, a tightness in my chest that I first wrote off as the leftover ache from moving a section of drywall at a friend's place earlier that week. I'm not supposed to be doing physical labor anymore. My doctor had told me that after my blood pressure scare 2 years ago. But I'd helped anyway, because that's what I do, and I'd been paying for it with some soreness. Except this wasn't soreness. This was different, This was pressure, like something sitting on my sternum, and then it moved up into my jaw. I knew what that meant. I didn't call Ruth first. I called 911. And then, because I'm stubborn and the ambulance was going to take 12 minutes, I got my jacket and my health card and I drove myself to Oakville Trafalgar Memorial, which was 6 minutes away. And I walked myself into the emergency department and told the woman at the desk that I thought I was having a cardiac event. I was right. It was what they call an NSTEMI, a heart attack, but not the massive kind. A partial blockage in one of the arteries. Serious enough to admit me immediately. Serious enough for an emergency angioplasty at 2 in the morning. Serious enough that the attending physician told me, with a very measured look on his face, that I was fortunate I'd come in when I did. Somewhere in between the triage and the procedure, the nursing staff called Ruth. She answered. I know she answered because the nurse told me so afterward, and because I was coherent enough by then to hear one side of it. The nurse explained the situation clearly. Possible cardiac event, husband in emergency, procedure being performed shortly, family should come. Ruth asked what time it was. The nurse told her. Ruth said, "It's almost 11. We have a family event tomorrow that starts early. Can someone else contact me in the morning if anything changes?" The nurse, God bless her, because she did this for me, held the phone near enough that I caught the tail end of that sentence. And then the nurse said, carefully, "Mrs. I want to make sure you understand. This is a cardiac situation. It could become serious very quickly." And Ruth said, "I understand. Please call me tomorrow if there's an update." That's it. That's the whole conversation. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I've had to. My wife of 27 years, told that her husband is in emergency with a possible heart attack, asked what time it was, and then requested a morning callback. I had the procedure. I lay in the recovery room afterward watching the ceiling tiles and listening to the monitor beep in its steady, indifferent way, and I thought about the Italian tile in my kitchen and the Lexus in my driveway and the open bar at my son's birthday party that I had paid for. And I thought, I finally understand. The load-bearing wall is me, and nobody has been maintaining it. My friend Dennis came. I called him from recovery, around 4 in the morning, because I needed someone who knew where I kept my spare key and would feed my dog, a 14-year-old lab named Chief, who can't be left without his evening pills. Dennis showed up within the hour, sat with me for a while, and didn't say much. He's known me for 30 years. He understood what my silence meant. Jason came the next afternoon. Not the morning, the afternoon. Around 2 o'clock, still wearing what looked like the tail end of the previous night's outfit, smelling faintly of the open bar I'd funded. He came in, looked me over, said, "You scared us, Dad," and then spent the next 20 minutes on his phone in the corner. Sasha didn't come at all that day. Ruth arrived at 4:30. She brought flowers. The grocery store kind, still in the plastic sleeve. And she sat in the chair beside the bed and said all the right things in the wrong tone. The tone that means the words are being performed rather than felt. She asked the doctor a few questions. She straightened my blanket once. She left by 6 because they had dinner reservations that had been booked for weeks, and it seemed a shame to waste them. I didn't say much. I watched. I filed everything away. I have a friend, a different friend from Dennis, a man named Paul who is a retired barrister out of Hamilton, who once told me that the most valuable skill he ever developed was the ability to observe without reacting, to collect information and keep his face neutral while his mind worked. He said, most people reveal everything they are in moments of stress, if you're patient enough to watch. I was very patient, I had a hospital bed and a lot of time and nothing to do but watch. What I saw was this. My wife was relieved that I hadn't died, not because she would have missed me, but because my dying would have been inconvenient. My son was present in the way that satisfies the minimum requirement of presence. And no one, not one person from my immediate family, had come to that hospital on a Friday night. I was discharged on the Monday. Ruth picked me up, brought me home, heated up soup, and went to her book club. The house felt the same as it always had. Nice, comfortable, well-appointed, and about as warm as a hotel lobby. I spent the next 3 weeks being quiet. Recovering, yes, but also thinking. Planning, if I'm being honest. Because there comes a point where you stop being blindsided by a thing and start deciding what you're going to do about it. The first call I made was to my lawyer, a woman named Christine who had done our wills years ago and who, when I explained the situation carefully, listened without interruption and then said, "Let's start with the estate documents." The second call was to my financial advisor, Robert. Add his direct line. The third call was to a locksmith. I want to be clear about something, because I thought carefully about how to say this. I didn't act from anger. I know that might be hard to believe, but it's true. What I acted from was clarity. There is a difference. Anger is hot and loud and makes you sloppy. Clarity is quiet and methodical and makes you precise. By the time I was making those calls, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just accurate. Ruth and I had kept our finances reasonably separate. A joint account for household expenses, which we both contributed to, and separate personal accounts and investments. This had been Ruth's preference early in our marriage, and I had agreed to it without much thought. It turned out to be the luckiest financial arrangement I had ever accidentally made. The joint account had enough in it to cover the shared bills. I wasn't going to leave Ruth unable to pay for groceries or utilities. That's not who I am. But everything else, the investment account in my name, the RRSP, the TFSA, the rental property in Hamilton I bought quietly 8 years ago and never made much fuss about. All of that was mine, legally and clearly, and all of it was being reviewed and restructured with Christine's guidance. The Lexus lease was in Ruth's name. She could deal with that. The tennis club membership was in my name. I canceled it on a Wednesday afternoon. The joint credit card, which Ruth used regularly and without particular restraint, I called to reduce the limit. Not cancel, just reduce. Enough that a spontaneous spa weekend was no longer a casual option. I also, quietly, had a conversation with Dennis about temporarily staying at his place in Burlington. Just a few weeks, I told him. He didn't ask for a reason. He just said, "Room's yours whenever you want it." What I hadn't decided yet was when. The when decided itself. It was a Tuesday evening, about 2.5 weeks after I'd come home from the hospital. I was in the kitchen, ostensibly reading, really just sitting, in the way you sit when you're waiting for something to become clear. Ruth was on the phone in the living room, and I wasn't trying to listen, but our house isn't large enough for that kind of privacy when someone's voice carries. She was talking to Jason. I heard her say, "He's fine, he just mopes around, you know how he is." I heard her say, "I've been managing. It's not like he's easy to be around at the best of times." And then I heard her say, "Once things settle down, I'm going to talk to Linda about the Palm Springs trip. We need something to look forward to." I sat with my book open and my tea going cold, and I thought, there it is. There's the answer to the question I'd been asking myself for 35 years. I'm 63 years old, and I'm what she's managing. I waited until the following Saturday when Ruth had a full day, her yoga class in the morning, then lunch with her friend Linda, then an afternoon thing she'd mentioned involving Linda's daughter's bridal shower. A full day. 6, 7 hours. I packed methodically, not frantically, methodically. One bag for clothes, one box for the things that actually mattered to me. Chief's vet records, a photo of Lily as a kid at a hockey game, the cufflinks my own father had given me. I didn't take the Italian tile. I didn't need it. I left a note on the kitchen table under her coffee mug so she'd find it immediately. It said, "Ruth, I've gone. I should have gone a long time ago. I've spoken with Christine about next steps. The joint account is intact for bills. Please don't call me to argue. I'm done arguing. Arthur?" Then I loaded Chief into the truck, backed out of the driveway of the house I'd spent 25 years building equity in, and drove to Dennis's place in Burlington. I turned my phone off for the first hour, not because I was afraid of what she'd say, but because I'd spent enough of my life managing other people's emotional responses to my decisions, and I didn't want to do it anymore. Not even once more. I turned it back on after I'd had a coffee and fed Chief and sat on Dennis's back porch watching the lake go gray in the late afternoon light. 17 missed calls. 8 from Ruth, 4 from Jason, 2 from an unknown number that was probably Sasha, and 3 from my mother-in-law, who I will simply say has never liked me and who I suspected had been waiting 27 years for this moment to feel validated. There was one text from Lily that said, "Dad, Dennis called me. Are you okay? I'm proud of you. I cried a little reading that. I'm not ashamed of it. The divorce process in Ontario is, it turns out, a reasonably orderly thing when both parties have separate finances and no minor children and a lawyer who knows what she's doing. It's not fast and it's not painless, but it has a logic to it which I appreciated. Christine handled most of it. I handled the parts I needed to handle and stayed out of the parts I didn't. Jason called me 4 more times in the first week. The calls had a particular quality, not quite concern, more like the anxious energy of someone who has realized that the system they've been living inside might be changing. He wanted to know if I was serious. He wanted to know if there was any room to talk. He wanted to know, and I gave him credit for at least eventually asking this directly, if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I told him I needed some time. I told him that the conversation we needed to have was one I'd have when I was ready, not when he was. He didn't like that, but he accepted it. Sasha called once from her own number, and I let it go to voicemail. The message was polished, sympathetic, a little too articulate to be spontaneous. She was sorry about the birthday weekend. She hoped I understood it hadn't been personal. She wanted me to know she cared about my health. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. What I want to tell you, and I'm telling you this because I think it matters, I think it's the part that usually gets left out of these stories, is what the weeks after felt like. Not the logistics, the feeling. It felt like putting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I know that sounds like a line from a self-help book, and I'm sorry for that, because it's also simply true. The first morning at Dennis's place, I woke up at 6, made coffee, sat on the porch with Chief at my feet, and had no particular obligation to anyone for the first time in decades. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, the good kind of quiet, the kind that means something has finally stopped that had been running too long. I started walking again, not for any medical reason. Well, for that too, the cardiologist had been fairly direct about lifestyle changes. But because I wanted to. I walked along the lakeshore in the mornings when the light was still low and the path was mostly empty except for the serious joggers and the old men like me with their dogs. I thought about what I'd built. 38 years in construction. A business I'd sold profitably in 2018. A house I'd put real work into. a daughter who calls every Sunday, a dog who follows me from room to room like I'm the most reliable thing in the world, which, these days, I'm trying to be. The rental property in Hamilton, a 3-unit building on a quiet street near Gage Park, is now fully in order and generating income I'd never really needed before, but find very practical now. I'm renting a place in Burlington, close to Dennis, close to the lake. It's small, but it's mine, in a way the Oakville house never quite was. Ruth and I don't speak. That's not bitterness. It's just the natural outcome of two people who have nothing left to say to each other. Jason and I have had one real conversation, a long one, at a diner in Mississauga a couple of months ago. He said some things that needed to be said. I said some things back. I don't know what we are to each other right now, something in between strangers and family, trying to find the shape of whatever comes next. I'm willing to try. I told him that. I also told him that I'm not willing to be someone's backup plan or their financing mechanism anymore, and that if we're going to have a relationship, it has to be a real one. He said, "That's fair, Dad." I don't know if he meant it yet, but it's a start. Lily came to visit in February. She stayed for 5 days, slept on Dennis's pull-out couch, and spent most of the time walking with me and Chief along the lake shore and telling me things about herself she'd apparently been waiting years to say. She's thinking about moving back to Ontario. I told her not to do it on my account, but I won't pretend I don't hope she does. The heart monitor I wore for the first month post-discharge is gone now. The cardiologist cleared me in January and said my numbers are better than they've been in years, which he attributed to medication and reduced stress, and which I could have told him was the same thing. I'm not going to tell you I have no regrets. That would be dishonest. I regret the years I didn't see clearly. I regret the energy I spent on a version of my life that was mostly illusion. I regret that it took lying alone in an emergency room at 2 in the morning to finally hear what I'd been refusing to listen to. But I don't regret leaving. Not even a little. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 40 or 50 or even 60. The load-bearing parts of your life are not the Italian tile. They're not the Lexus. They're not the party you funded or the club membership or the renovated kitchen. Those things are the facade. Nice to look at. Structurally irrelevant. The load-bearing parts are the people who show up at 2 in the morning. The ones who drive to Burlington without asking why. The ones who text, "I'm proud of you," when you've finally done the hard thing. I've got a few of those. Turns out that's enough. Turns out that's more than enough. Chief is asleep at my feet right now, in a patch of afternoon light coming through the window. He's 14 and slow, and his hips are going, and the vet says we're probably looking at months rather than years. I'm not ready for that, but I'm here for it. Whatever it is, the same way he was always there for me. Reliably, quietly, without conditions. I think that's what I was always looking for. I just had to lose almost everything else first to finally recognize it. There's a moment I keep coming back to, not the angioplasty, not the drive home from the hospital with the grocery store flowers sitting on the back seat. The moment I keep returning to is smaller than any of that. It's me, sitting at the kitchen table 3 weeks after I got home, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold, listening to Ruth tell Jason over the phone that she'd been managing. That word, managing. I'd spent 27 years being someone's situation to manage. And the strange thing is, I hadn't seen it clearly until that exact moment. Not because I was stupid, but because I'd been too busy keeping everything running to stop and look at what I'd actually built. That's the thing about clarity. It doesn't come when you're moving. It comes when you're finally still enough to see straight. I think about the choices I made in those weeks after the hospital, and I don't think of them as revenge. I think of them as honesty, finally being honest about what the situation actually was and then acting accordingly. Ruth had shown me exactly who she was when she asked the nurse to call back in the morning. Jason had shown me who he was when he walked in the next afternoon, smelling of the party I paid for. The information was right there. I just had to be willing to accept it instead of explaining it away. That's what I'd call the first hard thing, being willing to know what you already know. Most of us resist it. We're good at finding reasons why the difficult truth isn't quite true yet, why we should wait a little longer, give it one more chance. I did that for years. I was skilled at it, but there's no wisdom in that kind of patience. Real wisdom is knowing when the evidence is in and then having the honesty to act on it rather than the comfort of pretending otherwise. The second hard thing is doing something about it quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way designed to punish. Just deciding, with a clear head, what a fair outcome looks like, and then working toward it methodically. That takes a different kind of strength than most people expect. It's not the strength of confrontation. It's the strength of staying calm when everything in you wants to either collapse or explode. It's the strength of calling your lawyer with a steady voice and saying, "Let's start with the estate documents." And the third hard thing, the one that took me the longest, was understanding that leaving wasn't failure. That's the story I'd been telling myself for years, that a man who walks away from his marriage, his house, his version of family life, has somehow not measured up. That's wrong. Sometimes the most decent thing you can do, for yourself, for the people around you, is to stop pretending that a broken foundation is holding weight. It isn't. You don't fix a load-bearing wall by painting over the crack. You address it directly, or you get out before it comes down on you. Chief is asleep at my feet as I write this. Lily called this morning. Dennis is coming over for dinner on Friday. My numbers at the cardiologist were good. I've got less than I used to. I've got exactly what I need. The rest was just facade.